White House has informed 11 officials who had been appointed to military service academy boards by former President Trump to resign or they will be fired. A source says that those told to resign include prominent officials such as Sean Spicer, Kellyanne Conway, David Urban, H.R. McMaster. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki answered questions this afternoon about whether President Biden was politicizing the issue.
I will let others evaluate whether they think Kellyanne Conway and Sean Spicer and others were qualified or not political to serve on these boards. But the president's qualification requirements are not your party registration. They are whether you're qualified to serve and whether you're aligned with the values of this administration.
Well, Kellyanne Conway just responded on Twitter with a copy of the letter she sent back to President Biden, which concludes, "I'm not resigning, but you should." Let's discuss. Sungmin, let me start with you. Psaki was responding to your question there, but we should point out it's not just political figures like Kellyanne Conway and Sean Spicer that were fired from these boards. It includes David Urban, who used to be a commentator here. He went to West Point. H.R. McMaster, who he was fired from the board of West Point today by Biden, but on Saturday he's going to get their highest alumni association award for graduates. So there are some individuals that have a claim to these positions who were just fired.
Right. And the point that Jen was making to our questions earlier today is that these are presidential appointees. So, of course, they serve at the pleasure of the president who is in office. And she said she wanted appointees to the board that would better reflect the president's values. But also these boards, traditionally, these are, largely advisory and ceremonial. A lot of these they're 3-year terms. They go across administration. So it was an interesting move by the administration to do this. Now, how far the former Trump officials fight this and make it an issue, we'll have to see. I mean, Kellyanne Conway's letter seemed to think that she was going to push this on a little bit further. Right, and it wasn't exactly a letter that was demonstrating that she was capable of doing the job in a nonpartisan way. But John, let me ask you, because as Sungmin points out, these terms for these board members are staggered. Yeah. There were people from the Obama administration on the boards when Trump started who were not fired, who were still there. One of the fired Board of Visitors appointees, Megan Mobbs, who's a veteran, wrote, "President Biden ran on a supposed platform of unity, but his actions speak directly to the contrary." Wouldn't keeping at least some of the people like H.R. McMaster or David Urban or Megan Mobbs on the committee, on these boards, wouldn't that be more in keeping with what Biden promised he would do?
Maybe, but we talk about the Trump administration as if these were the Bush people or they were the Reagan people. This was not like a normal situation. We had a president of the United States who was doing really irregular things. He had a hotel that foreign leaders were staying at to try to put money in his pocket, by all reports. And he got away with that. They put a Supreme Court justice on the court in the last year of the administration after denying Barack Obama to do the very same thing. I think we have to look at this in the totality of what really has happened with the Trump administration and recognize this is not normal, and we shouldn't pretend like the Trump time was normal.
Well, that just seems like the ratchet effect, which is what we strive to prevent, I would think, if we're trying to bring people together. In addition, I feel like it takes a real brain trust to look at the withdrawal from Afghanistan and be like, the military needs a shakeup, and I know where I'm going to do it on the boards of the military academies. Look, Megan Mobbs, for one, just to name one, is a young female Afghanistan vet on the board of West Point. She deserves to be there, and her viewpoint is important, and the fact that these people can work in Comity and have for years is a boon to the military, and they shouldn't be tossed out.
No, this is actually reflective of a stance that I came across in some reporting months ago. I remember during the transition, I was doing a story on what the Biden administration's approach would be to the different cabinet agencies and looking at the Department of Homeland Security, given that was so molded by the Trump administration to focus on some of the more aggressive immigration policies. One transition official told me when I asked, what about career officials that were here for multiple administrations, not just Trump, but also the Obama administration, or just anybody that worked for Trump and was involved in these policies? Would you consider keeping any of them? And this person said they are poisoned at this point. We're moving on from those folks. Now, that is for positions where you're instrumental in, immigration policies, border policies, you're at a cabinet agency. This is different, right? We're talking about boards. And as was just stated, some of those, symbolic of a certain kind of bipartisanship that the president has touted as well.
Let's talk about the battle inside the Democratic Party right now. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer saying today that they're moving full steam ahead when it comes to this $3.5 trillion budget package, despite requests for a pause from Senator Manchin. Who has the power right now in these negotiations? I can't tell. You have both AOC and Joe Manchin and Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi. I can't tell who has the leverage.
Right. Well, you've got Senator Manchin with his recent comments. You've got Pelosi, who has said that they're going to try and bring a vote on infrastructure by September 27th. However, I mean, is that going to come to fruition now? I mean, with, members of the House, Democrats in the House also focusing on reconciliation. A couple weeks ago, I did some reporting with my colleague Jonathan Wiseman, where we said, the president has clearly, showed that he can work with some Republicans and Democrats in Congress. But this is the real test of actually, can you unify those within your own party?
Right. Can he work with the progressives? Take a listen to AOC segment.
I, as well as many, many members of the Progressive Caucus, simply will not vote for Senator Manchin's infrastructure bill unless it is tied together with the Build Back Better Act, so that we have an all of the above approach, so that we aren't saying it's either your bill or our bill, but that both of these bills must move forward together or neither will.
Is there a path forward here?
There's Democratic leaders are trying to find a path forward. I think the power center kind of just really shifts back and forth depending on where things are. And I think liberals have been particularly frustrated, especially in the House, but also in the Senate as well, that so much of the attention and so much of the focus has been on the Manchins of the cinemas of the world. And that's why they're trying to bring it back to them, saying our votes matter too. We have a vote and we have a say in this matter too. So a lot of the hangups are procedural, as Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez just mentioned, but there are deep policy divisions too that we can't, we also have to focus on here. One is on healthcare. How are you going to, for example, expand Medicare benefits versus shoring up Obamacare? And do you have the money to do that? How high does the corporate tax rate go? And there are divisions, Republicans would call it disarray, Democrats might call it dynamism. But there's a lot of substantive hurdles to have to overcome as well for the next several weeks.
And then, of course, there are the 19 Senate Republicans who voted for infrastructure. They're getting pressure from the MAGA side of the Republican Party to not vote for that, even though they supported it.
Yeah, no, and I think the question with the power center is whether progressives are actually willing to torpedo something with that sweet, sweet trillion at the end of it, even if it's 1 trillion, right? So I think there's a telling quote from Pelosi where she said, so we have reconciliation, infrastructure, CR, and somewhere in there, we'll do the debt ceiling. And the U.S. Congress is telling you that they're going to do most of this during September. It's September 8th. Good luck with that. Get to kissing Manchin's pinky ring and move on.
I love Pelosi when they asked her the question about the number. She basically said, I said what I said. It's $3.5 trillion.
Right.
Listen, there are two roads for Democrats. The one road is pass something and give people something to run on and talk about, or oblivion, right? If they don't pass anything, 2022 is a wrap. There's nothing for them to run on anymore. So they've got to pass something. I think everybody understands that. It might be a mess along the way, but it would behoove them to do something very quickly before it becomes something that the public turns against.